SOPs, standard operating procedures.
One of the most important things business owners can do in preparation to build a business that works without them.
We're talking about building your SOP library and really where that should be built, where you should be able to access that.
How do you channel up and how do you sequence the processes?
Especially for contractors that are like out in the field. Writing it out, it actually isn't that helpful. You need something recorded.
The problem is we go to all this effort to build these processes and policies and procedures and write them out, and then we just lose track of them.
If there's not a rhythm of referencing SOPs, it's going to be really hard.
How do you get that change out?
Well, first you have to go into
expert advice, practical tips, real-life stories. Have less stress, more time, and more money in your business. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor.
Martin, one of our best series that we did on the Cash Flow Contractor was getting organized in your business, where we kind of went through the 9 steps, everything from vision all the way to KPIs, SOPs. And so one of the things that we talked about is having an org chart of all of the functions and roles inside of your company, and then having a job description for each of those roles. And then inside of that job description, being able to reference SOPs, standard operating procedures for each and every role on your team. So today we're talking about building your SOP library and really where that should be built, where you should be able to access that. And you're having some issues with some clients on just navigating where to store SOPs, where to find them. I'll let you define, kind of give us the lay of the land and the problem here.
Okay. Well, one of the funniest things I ever see in detective shows, right? The spy picks the lock and goes into the office. And in the old days, they went with their flashlight to the file cabinet, fingered their way through the files and pulled it out.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they go in and they don't have very much time, and they get into this password locked computer and put a thumb drive in there and find the files and download them and just barely get out the door, right? They just lose me, right? Because I can't do that in my own office, right?
Right.
So that's a metaphor for what we're talking about. But one of the most important things that business owners can do in preparation to build a business that works without them is to write the processes, the SOPs. I've added some things to what we talked about in that prior work podcast, the steps of getting organized. I've added workflows as a separate, how do you channel up and how do you sequence the processes? But you do all this. I've got clients right now who are going through experiences with employees and some other issues, and they're using the opportunities to write processes.
Yeah.
Right. Which is turning, lemons into lemonade. So it's great. The problem is, over time, you build processes, you write your HR manual, you write your procedure manual for how you handle your CRM. You write all these things, and then they kind of just disappear, right? They're in a Google Drive under a name that wasn't a naming protocol, so we called it Good Times. I mean, can you remember what you thought it was or how you named it? Not only that, but you didn't write it for you. You wrote it for your folks, and they don't have a clue what you named, and they're starting to search for keywords. And anyway, so we go to all this effort to build these processes and policies and procedures and workflows and write them out, and then we just lose track of them.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one problem.
Okay. Losing track.
Historically, when I was doing this, not pre-computer, but pre-ease of computer days, we wrote these processes out, typed them out.
Yeah.
And I put them in notebooks with 3 hole punch rings and handed them out. Well, several issues with that. One is paper isn't very searchable, right? Paper involves flipping the pages and looking for whatever it was you're looking for. The second thing was you won't go a week doing something like that when you won't have to change a process or modify it in some way. And how do you get that change out? Well, with paper, you reprinted that page and hoped that the page breaks matched up so you didn't have to reprint the whole chapter, right? So we've
Yeah.
got that same problem. So losing track of them, how to distribute them where the people who need them can find them, and how to make changes. So I think there are more to that, but that's really maybe in a nutshell what I'm wrestling with. And I know in this day of electronics, well, I'll tell you what my dream was. It was a dream so great that I sat on my back patio on a Sunday and messed with it, was to use Chat GPT voice commands to search my wife's HR manual. And it did a great job. I just say, hey, what's the PTO policy around her name of her company? Well, here was the issue. I downloaded her policy and procedures manual to my hard drive. And then in chat, I uploaded it, which you can do.
Yeah.
There's a little paper clip, you upload it. And then I told it, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Look no further than the document that I just uploaded. I don't want you going to the internet or anything else. It was great. And I thought, woohoo, I have solved the problem. You know what the problem is, right,
You can't share it.
Khalil? No, you can't save it.
You can. You just have to make a GPT.
I got a GPT. Well, we'll talk about that. But I've got a GPT.
Okay.
And it will remember what it learned. It will not save the document. I have to reload it. I even use ChatGPT so where I had to download the document to my hard drive and then upload it to Chat and use it. When that session was over, that document was no longer out there.
No, that's definitely solvable. It's a user error, Martin, not the AI error.
I'm thrilled to hear that because I'm willing to admit my mistakes. That's what I want. That's what I want. And here, from an old guy's viewpoint, here's the difference. You can already search Google Drive. There are lots of ways to search things, looking for keywords. When I'm searching with Chat, I'm searching for, I'm going to say, ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't call it PTO, maybe just call it TO, and it never finds it.
Or they never reference PTO. They actually just say paid time off, and it's not the acronym.
And,
yeah,
it's not learning. So
gotcha.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about because I could help my clients a lot if I could give them a method for doing this.
Yeah.
And there may be people out there listening to us going, well, you idiot, that's the easiest thing in the world. This is what I do. And if that's the case, please tell us so we can share it.
Well, I think what we run into here with SOPs is that we want to have things written out a lot of times, and that's great. But especially for contractors that are like out in the field, writing it out, it actually isn't that helpful. You need a video. You need something recorded. I think there's a lot of great tools out there. You can just even use YouTube as a basic one, right? Record the video on your phone, upload directly to YouTube. Now we've got our end state of what this should look like and how to do it, right? I think that's usually one of the most important pieces that I think is missing from SOPs is that there's kind of step-by-step instructions, but there's that lack of like, this is what it looks like when it's done. And people don't really reference a lot of those use cases. They even start with that. They just start with, here's the steps. But I think it's really helpful to have that. Here's what the end state looks like. And here's a recording of me doing it on my screen or a recording of me doing it from my phone on the job site. And then from there, being able to have the step-by-step. Another thing that you run into with these SOPs that is challenging is, well, what do I need to have access to? What are some other references that help me understand how this fits into the piece of the puzzle? But that's kind of getting into what is on an SOP and what's included in it. And that's not really what this episode is about. You have your SOPs, you know what you want them to look like and what's included in them. Where do they live? What do I actually do with them? And I think probably the most common one that I've seen is that it's in some Word documents, Google Docs, whatever you use, and then it's just stored in a drive somewhere. And then they're not really sure which folder they should be in and who should have access. How do I, manage the access levels? They're just kind of in a document and they're there. And there's the one employee that is currently using them and why we built the processes or the SOPs in the first place, but then they're never really referenced by anybody else or used by anybody else. That's kind of the par for the course for SOPs. If you really, in that drive level, that's totally fine, right? You're going to be able to search for that SOP by the title and probably even what's inside that SOP just from your Google Drive search or from your Open Drive or Dropbox search. And that's fine, but it's not going to give you the ideas like you mentioned, at least right now. Like you're not going to be able to ask it a question. You're going to have to go and look for the document and then search through the document to be able to find the answer. And that takes some intuition from the employee's part. And so really you're probably going to have to be involved at the business owner level. I think soon Open Drive, if not already, probably does have some AI function. And same thing with Google Drive with Gemini, whatever Google's calling it these days, will have some AI functionality to really enter into your drive and be that source of knowledge. But it's still kind of not that clean and organized for you as the business owner. It's just kind of hoping and praying and wishing that Gemini and Copilot will figure those things out for you. I think if you're really going to have a standardized process for storing your SOPs, managing access levels, all those things, ideally you're putting it into a project management tool that's already being used by your team. That's not always the case that it would fit there. But for us, we use ClickUp. I know another great one is Notion. And it does take some setup. It takes some getting used to if you're not already in those tools. But if you're already in those tools, you can absolutely build your SOP library. The way that we structure this, we have an SOP library that is just all SOPs. Doesn't matter the role, the function, whatever. It's just all SOPs. And then we have these lists for each role in the company where those SOPs are linked to that list, right? So for our podcast manager, there are SOPs that fall under that list. And so you can find them just by going to the general, or you can find them under the podcast manager, right? So they kind of go in both places.
Now, is this in ClickUp?
This is in ClickUp. You could also do it inside of Notion. If you were going to do this in Google Drive, what would be challenging about that is essentially you would have a folder for SOPs, general SOPs. And then inside of that, you'd have another folder for podcast manager is what I used, but maybe it's foreman or project manager. You'd have a folder for those, and then you would have the SOPs for each of those roles inside of there. Now, what's nice about with ClickUp or with Notion, I can have the SOP be in all three of those places at once. So I can go to an all SOP view and it shows me all of the SOPs. I can go to maybe the project manager and the foreman use the same SOP for their role. It's a part of both of their jobs and they both need to have access. You can put it in both places, right? So it can be in multiple lists is what it's called in ClickUp. In Notion, it's going to be called projects. So that's nice that you can have it across the board. You can also have some really great filters that are a part of tables. So like if you want to, like you can have a cadence field for each of your SOPs. So maybe this SOP is done weekly, or maybe it's done once a month, once a year, every single day. You can put that cadence in there and then you can filter by the cadence. Hey, I want to see all of our weekly SOPs, right? Or I want to see all of our daily SOPs or as needed SOPs. You can also have like a time stamp to where you can see how long, like a time estimate for each SOP, how long it takes to get through it. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours, but you can have that time estimate on there. The next thing, and why I think it's so great to put it inside of a project management tool, is that as you're going through your tasks in your project management tool, like ClickUp or Notion, you can reference the SOP that you're doing as a part of your task list, right? So I'm looking right now at our ClickUp and I have our order business cards SOP. If I assign a task to somebody to order business cards for me, I can reference the SOP. So they have their task to do it, but then they can also see the SOP right next to it of how to do it. And then anytime someone needs to order business cards and they look at the order business cards SOP, they're going to be able to see all of the times that that task has been completed and be able to look at an example essentially, right? And so you can actually in the same place that you're doing your work and managing your tasks, you can see all of your tutorials, SOPs inside of the same place. And that's what I think is powerful. You don't have to go to a different tool to go and find those things. So that's kind of where we build our SOP library and how I'd manage that. The next kind of step of that is that all these project management tools have AI integrated already, right? And so you can, searching for those ideas, it's essentially ChatGPT right inside of there. You can search for those ideas automatically. Hey, what is our PTO policy? Like you said, what's our dress policy for, that's your HR manual. But we could say, hey, where do we usually order business cards from, right? How long does it take us to receive the business cards once we've submitted them to the print shop, right? You can ask those kinds of questions without even have to diving into the SOP, and it'll tell you that information directly in the chat, right? So you're chatting with your SOPs essentially. And
So what's
yeah.
is the chat part of ClickUp, or is it an add-on, or what?
Yeah, so that's kind of the tricky thing. And this is really the use case for all AI. Essentially, what most of them are doing, there's only a few, well, there's lots, but popular large language models, ChatGPT being one of them, Gemini being another. I think X has Grok, I think is what it's called. So those are large language models. That's really the true like AI. Then there's all these tools like ClickUp or Notion or any of the other ones that you see out there that are purchasing the license to ChatGPT for the most part, to OpenAI's large language model. And essentially, they purchase that license from there and then integrate it into their product. And now in ClickUp, I'm really using ChatGPT, but just inside of my ClickUp or inside of my Notion. And it's usually an add-on to get that AI functionality. Sometimes it's $5 per user. I'm not really familiar with the pricing, but it's around there roughly to be able to use that AI. And I think there's a lot of value in it because you can use, just like you're doing ChatGPT, to draft documents and write job descriptions or create social posts or whatever you're using that your ChatGPT account for, you can do with your license to AI inside of ClickUp or Notion or whatever the tool is. So essentially, rather than giving all of your employees a ChatGPT license, you can just give them a license inside of your project management tool or whatever it is. So yes, there is some added cost, but minimal compared to what your other solutions are, right?
So how would a hardworking contractor figure this out and choose?
It's really not
Seriously.
that complicated. We've got a template for an SOP, really for an entire SOP library that I can put in the show notes for everybody. And we'll also put it into a Google Doc format. I believe we have that as well in case you want to use Google Docs in your Google Drive. If you use Microsoft Word, you can just copy the Google Doc and put it into Word. But you can follow that SOP for building the SOP. And then in terms of building the library, it's just start adding your SOPs into that library in a ClickUp or in a Notion. Then once you have all of them in there, it's really easy. There's a button like an AI button in the top corner and in the bottom corner that you can just chat with, and you can just reference specifically your SOPs and chat specifically with the SOPs function and just start asking questions. It's really pretty straightforward and easy.
And that's at that large language model level
Mhm.
of question asking.
Correct.
Hey, would you tell probably everybody does, but what the heck is large language model? What's that mean?
Oh, I'm not
In
an
layman.
expert in this, but in layman's terms, from basically what it's saying is it's all what you're doing is you're training a machine to understand all of the language that we use. So essentially, a large language model is built up of a ton of data. So basically, everything that you could ever search on Google inside of one computer, right? And when you've trained it on all of that data, it essentially knows that knowledge and then is then trained how to actually give the best answer to people, right? So really all a large language model is a really incomprehensible amount of data for us, like we couldn't even fathom how much data it is that is on one computer. And that one computer is powered by some algorithms to be able to tell you what the best information is. So
Yeah, it's well acquainted with how we use language, in our case, English, and how to anticipate what we're going to say
Yep.
and what we'd understand coming back.
Yeah,
I really,
there's a fascinating, there's some really good episodes on AI if you're interested in learning more about those. Joe Rogan has a couple different ones. And then Lex Friedman had Elon Musk on recently, and I thought that was really fascinating. I think I mentioned that in our last podcast, actually, that he talked about AI for Grok and how it's built and all that kind of stuff. And it's very, very fascinating.
yeah, he also, in that, I think probably same podcast, talked about Neuralink, where they're putting a chip in your brain and they've already done it and they're already communicating with it. And
Yeah.
one of the innocent sounding ideas is that it can give paralyzed people,
Yeah.
the ability to interact with computers by just thinking.
Yeah.
And then from a lot less innocent sounding things that could go on.
Yeah.
Well, we all can use our imaginations, right?
Right.
Anyway, it's a happening deal. That's not theory.
No, it's happening right now. So, going back to the SOPs though, in terms of building your library, I think something that's important that is overlooked a lot of times, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is this what you see, Martin, where someone gets really motivated, where they have a new employee or there's kind of, an employee about to come on and they get really serious about building out SOPs for that role. And they build out the SOPs for that one specific instance and it kind of works. It helps a little bit and it's referenced in the beginning of that role. And then the person gets accustomed to how to do it and they never reference the SOP again. And then it's just kind of lost. Is that what you see? Maybe not.
No, that's 100% of why we're having this conversation. And that oftentimes provides the impetus. There are people who do it routinely, but it is often a change. Somebody coming, somebody leaving, new machine. They're new with a business coach who thinks maybe we ought to look at a process and do this. Get all fired up, do it, and then it languishes and disappears. And the shame of that is there are changes to be made every time you create an onboarding SOP for new shop folks, and because a guy shows up, and then you don't hire anybody for a while, and then you hire another guy, and maybe you remember, maybe you don't. But if they're easy to find, you can pull them up, look at them, realize where you made a mistake or what you'd like to change, do it easily because it's already written, and then deploy it on the next guy who comes in, next person. Yeah, that easy access for the employee and for whoever, the manager, whoever's going to be making changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm after.
Well, I think really it's almost like software where, I've always said that the hardest part of software is not picking the right tool, knowing how to use the tool. It's really that you're changing your behavior and your habits. You buy a new software, that's a new behavior. And just like it's really hard to start going to the gym if you've never gone to the gym, or start eating super healthy and you eat like crap. You have to change a behavior to be able to use that software. It's the same thing with the SOPs. If there's not a rhythm of referencing SOPs, updating SOPs, adding new ones in your company, it's going to be really hard to just say, we've got SOPs now, right? It's going to take really intentional effort for people to use those regularly, to reference them, to update them, to send them to other people. It's a culture thing, really, of, hey, we document our jobs. And you basically just mentioned this. There's a really great episode that I think touches a lot on SOPs and where I've learned a lot about this from Sam Corsos. I can't remember how you pronounce it, but he's on the Tim Ferriss podcast and he talks for about 3 hours. It makes you think, I thought I was organized and then this guy just took it to a different level. But he even has a link to some of his personal SOPs that he uses. And he says that as soon as you publish an SOP, it is immediately deprecated, or not, maybe deprecated is not the right word, but it's essentially old. It's old news, because the next time you do it,
Obsolete.
yeah, obsolete. Like, it's still valuable, but it needs to be updated again, right? Because there's a new step. Yeah, you have to go and, like, something changes. Even if it's the tiniest thing, something new is happening, right? And so if you really want to use SOPs, first question, my question is, should you be using SOPs? Is the role and the job that you're doing stable enough and not changing enough where the SOP is going to add value? And is it going to be used by enough people that it's actually going to make a difference and save you time? Because the reality of what could happen is you're making these SOPs for this new role that's never existed before. You're getting your best guess at what the process should be. That process actually hasn't been tried and tested and used multiple times and is going to evolve, and it's actually the wrong way to do it in 2 months. And then you don't have a culture of using SOPs, so that you never even use that, document that you spent hours creating that one time, because it's not valuable. Sometimes SOPs are basically optimizing the thing that should never be optimized, is basically my point, right? And so
Right.
I think that's the first question you need to answer. I think an SOP makes sense if it's something that is going to touch everyone on your team, like submitting PTO. That's a valuable thing to have an SOP for, so that you don't have to answer the question every time someone submits for PTO. When somebody needs to file receipts, you don't want to have to train them on that every single time. That's a great thing. When these things happen regularly and they're also touching a lot of people, that's great. If you're making SOPs for this brand new role, they really shouldn't be SOPs, but more so, hey, here's the responsibilities we want you to have. And then they should document their job as they go. And that becomes the SOPs over time. But maybe that person is maybe I'm trying to think of a good role for this. Maybe you're a company that's hiring an estimator, and it's you've been doing the estimating forever. This is really a step out for you guys. You're hiring that estimator to now estimate every job for you. And you really don't plan on having 2 estimators on your team for another 2 years, 3 years, or even beyond that. And you really never see this team growing more than like 4 people. Maybe right now isn't the best time to do those SOPs. Maybe it's good to, like, work through some of the kinks of you not doing the estimating and someone else doing it. And eventually, over time, as their role gets solidified, as they've documented their job, as you've recorded meetings of you training the individual on how to estimate the jobs properly, and as you learn that, our margins were terrible and we actually need to do this much, and you work out the kinks of that, and then you're about to hire the next estimator, that's a really good time to have those SOPs created and have a library for that role. And then you'll scale that role, and the SOP will actually be used by multiple people. It's terrible to build something like an SOP and waste a bunch of time on it whenever it's actually never going to be used by anybody. So those are my thoughts. I don't know, maybe I'm going off course here with what you wanted to discuss.
Well, I wasn't really concerned right now about whether we should have one or not. That's a valid point. But when we do have them,
Yeah.
what do we do with them? So we will not have just wasted our time,
Yeah.
trying to put it together.
I think the HR ones are really great because they will touch every employee. I think there's other administrative ones that are really valuable to have, because sometimes this admin stuff comes up once a year and everybody forgets because we only had to do it once, right? Or they come up quarterly or something like that. Those are the ones where the SOPs are really valuable. If something's happening every single day, the SOPs are valuable, especially in terms of training, but they happen so regularly that it's just habit. People under what they get trained once, they repeat it so many times that they don't have to reference the SOP because they just know how. So I think it's those.
Let me
Yeah, go ahead.
ask you a question. Are you making a distinction between a process and a system and an SOP?
Oof. I'm not.
Because, well, I mean, I'm all in favor of, bullet pointing the processes, which don't necessarily go all the way into SOP, that anybody on many, many things, you
Yeah.
know, um, you're a sales guy, you're new. What's the first thing you do every morning? I go to my single source of truth
Yeah.
and I go look. That, do I need to write that down? I don't know, but that's part of it. I
Yeah.
think you're responsible to do that. You're responsible to move them to the next Kanban card, depending on whatever criteria, we base that on. But yeah, hey, buddy, you're supposed to do that. And you're supposed to do that every day. And
Yeah.
here's how you do it. Now, hopefully, they're not going to have to look at it more than once. But if it has some kind of intricacies in it, then they will. But I'm more for having more of those
Yeah.
uh, than fewer. Uh, I agree with you on making some of them. The way I talk to people about making SOPs or processes, if we're going to distinguish between the two, is that you think about what you actually do when you do that. You've done it 1,000 times.
Hmm.
Just hit the bullet points, right? That's where it starts. And that, seems to be always worthwhile and not too painful. You can flesh
Yeah.
it out,
I would call that a
details.
process, right? So the way that I think
So we
about it
are
is,
distinguished.
yeah. So the way that I would think about it, if we back up, I would say that at the highest level is a system, right? Where a system is made up of multiple processes, right? So maybe we have a sales system that includes everything from the software we use to the playbooks that we run, um, to how we quote, all that stuff. This is our sales system. And then there's a process underneath that for, quoting this type of job process, right? And it goes from start to finish, right? Of how you gather, all that kind of stuff. The SOP would be at an even lower level of like the detail in terms of how do you send a quote to somebody? Well, first you have to go into CRM to find the contact information. Then you've got to put all the information from the conversation into the quote. You've got to make sure it's designed. You've got to make sure address is right for everything. You got to make sure that there's an opportunity to send the signature. You send the email with the quote, right? That's the SOP of getting into that detail. The process is, well, here's how we quote jobs, right? Our quoting process. And so you have it bullet pointed from all the way through, right? That's how I think about it.
Yeah, it has. So you're saying the process has a number of SOPs as
Correct.
constituent components. Okay.
Correct. That's the way I think about it. And maybe people think about it differently. I'd love if you have different thoughts on how you structure system process SOPs, let us know in the show notes. We'd love to hear. But that's how I've thought about it, how I've been taught uh, in terms of thinking about it.
Well, kind of recapping, if you choose to do it,
Yeah.
and if you choose to have a process or what we've described separately as a SOP, getting them stored out there, there are a number of alternatives.
Yeah.
And using something like ClickUp,
Notion.
Guru, Notion, these
Well,
are not
let's talk about Guru really quick because that's a little bit
okay.
different. Guru is not like something where you're going to store stuff. It's basically taking all of your, just like I talked about how you have ClickUp and then you have like the AI integration that allows you to do all the searching and all that stuff. Maybe you already have SOPs inside of your Google Drive, maybe somewhere in like emails, or I don't know where you store them, right? Maybe your stuff is just everywhere. Guru essentially is your AI integration to all your tools. So you create a Guru account and then you
Okay.
connect your Google Drive, you connect your calendar, your email, you connect your Slack account, whatever integrates through Zapier, I believe. Um, Anything that integrates with Zapier, you connect to Guru, and then you just go into Guru to search stuff. And you can ask those same high level questions. Now, I haven't used it personally. I've heard great things, but I think also if you're not very organized already, it can become a little bit difficult to navigate. But if you are organized, but you're just spread out, Guru is a great option to be that, one AI for all of your tools that searches all information and gets you the answer you're looking for.
You talk about that stuff and connect my Gmail to Guru. Is that just some button clicks?
Yeah, so it's really not that hard. All that happens is you go into Guru and you choose your account that you want to connect. Maybe it's your Google Drive. You click on the Drive icon, it will pull up a login for you to log into your Google Drive. You log in and then it says, do you want to connect Google Drive to Guru? You say yes, and it's connected. It's really that straightforward.
And from that point on, I can get into Guru and search anything in my drive.
Correct.
Yeah. Which makes it sound real easy, but we don't really, and it will have read the documents. It's not just searching file and names.
It's always reading whatever's going on in the background inside of your company. So you added a new document. I don't know how real time it is, but I'm sure within minutes, you're able to then search for that document.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty cool tool. I'm still an advocate for using a specific project management tool, having your SOPs inside of that project management tool and referencing those. And then you can create like what's called a company wiki inside of ClickUp or Notion. But essentially it's this really nice, clean layout of all of your company information. So all of your SOPs, your hiring manual, your maybe there's a form inside of there that they can fill out to ask for time off, right? Or ask for a new book to be ordered for them to read because you offer free books. If they read a book and write the report and send it to you and talk about it in a team meeting, you'll buy a new book for personal development. Whatever that stuff is, you put that inside of your company wiki, and it's kind of like a centralized dashboard, if you will, that references all of these docs. But then there's a search function on the company wiki where they can ask questions, and then it'll use the AI to search the wiki of SOPs, policies, handbooks, whatever it is, and provide an answer. So,
well, things are different than they used to be.
very different. And, I struggle to think about this because a lot of this that I'm talking about is, I think, really valuable on the administrative level. And it's really hard at the foreman level. I think Jeff Finney was the best example of how he got people inside of his cabinet shop to use their SOPs. And he would record it himself on his phone. He'd upload it to YouTube. He'd then take the link to the video on YouTube and put it into a QR code generator. And then he'd have the QR
That
code.
was at each machine they could scan
Yeah.
that.
He would print out a sticker with the QR code on it and stick it on the machine. And there would be multiple for each machine where you're at this station in the manufacturing process of the cabinets. You scan the QR code, you can watch a video of exactly how to do it. And it would reference all the different common problems that happen at the machine and how to handle each one. And he still does that, to my knowledge. But that's a great way of doing it there. Maybe you do it on your truck for your crews. For each different tool, you have a QR code that references a video. For every different area of the truck or toolbox, you put a QR code and you have a label for each one that they can scan if they have a question or a thought or needed to see how that you use that tool. And then anytime you get a question, someone should be updating those videos or those documents, right? You don't have to link to a video. You could link to a document, but that's really the best way to really get those out in the open where people are seeing them regularly. I think that's a really good way of doing those out in the field.
Just in passing, mention if you're going to do videos, you really need to script it out, what you're paying attention to.
Yeah.
I have done videos where, showing a guy how to chalk a truck and unload it with a forklift and got the production all done and go back and watching it. And every time he's backing up, he's turned around, his elbows outside the cage. He's smoking a cigarette. Well, you can't use any of that, right?
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, what's really great about using a tool like Loom rather than YouTube, and that's another, again, we're just loading up on subscription costs here for people. But if you use Loom, I always recommend that you start, as you're starting the video, at least scripting what the video is about and what it's going to cover in the first 30 seconds. Hey, this video is about, how to load up the truck before going out for the day. We're going to cover all the materials you need, all the tools you need, what to check for on the truck, and who to notify that you're leaving or whatever it is, right? And so you mention all that in the first 30 seconds. The rest, if you script it word for word, I don't think that's valuable. but at least having just a checklist of what you're going to run through in that first 30 seconds then allows you to make sure you cover it in there. And then someone watching it can understand in the first 30 seconds if this video is going to be valuable or not, right? But if you use Loom, what it will do, especially if you've said that in the first 30 seconds, but even if you don't, it will create chapters automatically of the video and title the chapters. And so now whenever you go to look at that video of the SOP on Loom, it will tell you what is in the video chapter by chapter, and you can skip to the chapter in the video and just watch that section based upon what question you have. It'll also create, if you use the AI tool inside of Loom, you can say generate an SOP based on this video, and it'll write out a full SOP based on your video automatically, right? So
I did not know that.
Yeah, it'll also create
It's in Loom?
a checklist from this video. Yeah, that's all inside of Loom.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty cool. But there's so many great tools out there. Again, if you do need SOPs or you do have SOPs, I recommend using a project management tool like Notion or ClickUp to store those, because I think that's where they can actually be used the easiest. Linking to the SOPs throughout your shop, throughout your trucks, I think is a really valuable way to get those out there. And then, I think leveraging AI with these SOPs is extremely valuable for writing the SOPs, for searching the SOPs for real answers. So, yeah.
Sweet.
Any other questions you had about this, Martin?
Any more questions about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing is you were referring to project management tools, and I thought you were thinking about Builder Trend or something like that.
Yeah.
But you said ClickUp.
Yeah. So I really think about like Builder Trend as more of like an operations software.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
You could call it like a project management tool, sure, but really that fits into the operations side of it more than, I don't know. You can manage projects through a Builder Trend or a Jobber or whatever it is, but I consider that more operations based rather than like.
But you would recommend
projects.
ClickUp and Notion.
Yeah.
So when I have people coming in this week, as I do, I can talk to them about ClickUp and Notion. I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
And that's a place to write and store them, and we'll access them in the future.
And and you can do a lot more than that. That's just one functionality of those softwares.
Yeah. Well, we got to keep it one at a time for me.
One at a time. Cool. Well, we'll reference anything that we reference will be in the show notes, examples, templates, all that stuff. And then if anyone wants to talk about building their SOP library, we just helped a few people do this. And so happy to jump on a call and kind of walk you through what we do and how you could set this stuff up. So don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, thanks for chatting, Martin.
Hey, real quickly, did you notice that it rained here yesterday?
We had some flooding in our house.
Do you know how much rain we got?
No, I had no idea.
5.6 inches between 6 o'clock and noon. I don't know that.
6 in the morning?
6 in the morning and noon.
Wow.
At the airport, which our listeners don't know where it is, but it's a mile from me and it's about 2 miles from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, we literally had water going into our house. We had puddles.
Coming from the roof or up? Down or up?
No, coming from up. We live in a floodplain. So our back door, it was kind of snaking in a little stream, and had to take out the rug from the living room, and it was manageable. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's spewing out. It was just a slow dribble. And then it stopped once the rain kind of calmed down, but
Man,
it was bad.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, sir.
All right. We'll chat soon.
We'll see you. And congratulations on Morocco. Not quite enough congratulations.
I think we could have won it, but we got bronze in soccer. It's cool.
Yeah. Okay, man.
All right.
See you later.
Thanks for tuning in to the Cash Flow Contractor. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Visit thecashflowcontractor.com. See you next episode.